This island is so lush. I just love the green sugarcane and all the flowers everywhere and the blue of the sea. It's like a colourful palette of nature. Vibrant. I love it. I love it.
She was a girl with a divided heart, like the light and the dark, a divided heart, between two continents and somewhere far home, but where it really lay was deep within her soul. But where it really lay was deep within her soul.
Hello and welcome to Micki Pistorius Profiler on Record, episode 5. And by now I hope you've watched episode 5 of the television series called Catch Me a Killer, which is based on my book, Catch Me a Killer. In this episode, we meet the serial killer Mglengwa Zikode. And this investigation took place in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Now, KwaZulu-Natal was originally, still is, the kingdom of the Zulus, but it was at some stage the kingdom of King Chaka Zulu. And it has been ravaged by war. There was war amongst the Zulus and the Xhosas, there was war amongst the Zulus and the British, and the Zulus and the Boers, and currently as well there is political factual fighting in this province. It has also been ravaged by floods, but it is a beautiful place. A very beautiful province, and with hills, flowing hills, and then we have the Zulu huts in the rural areas, and also lush green sugarcane. So this is the setting. Now, Mglengwa Zikode, up to the age of 14, he had only met 2 women in his life, and that was his mother and his older sister. His father was an invalid, so he wasn't a very good role model to him. His mother worked very hard to sustain the family. So he never could identify with his father. And the sister became his surrogate mother. So in the Oedipal complex, which is 4 to 6 years, the sister became the surrogate mother figure, and he won that Oedipus complex competition against his dad because his dad was an invalid. Now, the implications of this later in his life is that he did not respect the authority of other men. For instance, he would enter one of the huts at night, just shoot the man, eliminate him, and then take and rape the women. He also challenged the authority of the detectives, and he would tell them that the women are mine. So that was the outcome of his Oedipus complex. Now, I would also like to compliment the cast. It's a very small cast in this episode, but they did a wonderful job, and especially as well the lady that played the mother of Zikode. Now, Zikode only went to school up to the age of 14, which also meant he skipped the latency phase. Now, during the latency phase, that's when children go to school from 6 to 12 years. And there at school, we know children, first of all, they learn to share with other children. They share their sandwiches. They develop empathy with other children. They start playing with other children. They have social skills. And there is a delayed gratification of needs. For instance, when a child is at home, before school and is hungry, then he'll ask his mom to give him food, and she will give him food immediately. In other words, once there is a need, there is an immediate gratification of that need. But when children start going to school, they have to wait for break before they can eat. In other words, they have to consider the community as well, not just their own needs, which is quite important. Now, schools have rules, and society have rules. And when people abide by the rules, then society functions, because the rules are there for the protection of the whole society. So children then, through this, learn compassion, and they learn empathy for their little friends, which is a very, very good thing. Zikode did not, because he skipped that phase. He was at home, and all his needs were immediately gratified. So He took what he wanted, when he wanted it, and he reached no opposition. So here we have this man. Sometimes I am concerned when I see parents really indulging their children's misbehavior, when children throw tantrums, or they scream, or they make it very uncomfortable for the other people around them, throwing a tantrum in a restaurant or etc., running around screaming. And the parents tend just to turn a blind eye to this. Now, what happens is people would often say children are just children. And that's right, they are children. And that is why they need parents and adults to guide them into social behavior. If we do not teach them manners or discipline, I'm not saying punishment, I'm saying discipline, then we are going to sit with serious problems in future. There was very interesting research, and it was done by Dr. Briggs. And Dr. Rahul Briggs, he was a professor of behavioral sciences at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And in an article in Psychology Today, he said teaching children at toddler age to self-regulate their emotions is an important component of positive parenting. This means setting limits by telling them firmly in a calm voice that behavior is unacceptable, still showing empathy towards their feelings. So let them express their feelings in words, not in negative actions. For example, we sometimes see a toddler pointing at water and he goes, Ask him to use your words. So he can say, I want water, or can I have water please? That stimulates them. So ask them, use your words. Tell me what upset you. And the child can say, I'm upset if you leave me behind and you walk ahead. I'm upset if you ignore me, etc. So using words instead of throwing tantrums or just screaming to get attention. And by the way, why do children always want our attention? Because they need us for survival. But in any case, if we use words, that will result in getting much more positive attention from people and adults. So Dr. Briggs says, when a child is allowed to negotiate often, then they learn this is an effective way to get what they want. And having consistent rules allows children to feel safe and secure. If they are allowed to negotiate too often, it sends a message that they, at the age of just 2 or 3, are actually in charge. And talk about anxiety provoking for a 2-year, 3-year-old child. So this is quite important. If we allow them or indulge them as young children to throw tantrums, to misbehave, and to be a general nuisance to the annoyance of other people, then what do we have there? We have selfish, attention demanding, inconsiderate behavior. Does that not sound like narcissism? The characteristics of narcissism? So are we already at the age of 2 or 3 planting the seeds of narcissism if we indulge them by misbehaving or being a general annoyance all the time? I'm not talking about a child really gets hurt, but I'm just, you know what I mean. Okay. Which means they will grow up being very unpopular with other people and they will have interrelationship problems. If we allow them or teach them as adults to self-regulate their emotions and to express themselves, then they will become mature, responsible adults and they will be happy and they will find life partners. And Zikode did not. He did not, and he did not find a life partner. So what happens is, I've explained previously, and we'll just recap on the Oedipus phase. So Freud's theory postulates the Oedipus phase, that's a very sexual phase, and it runs from 4 to 6 years. And it's followed by the latency phase. So the Oedipus phase means that the little boy falls in love with the mother, or the surrogate mother in this case, and the father is the opposition. So, and there are sexual fantasies as well in the subconscious of that child. So by the time that he went to school at 14, these sexual fantasies were there, but they were not repressed because he didn't want to identify with a father figure, which is representative of the super-ego or the conscience, and he didn't even go to school either. So when he went to school, he was, like a boy, very interested in the opposite sex, but he had no means and he didn't know how to communicate. So there he is, and like all teenage boys, he was also very curious about the opposite sex. Now, as a young man, he also had the attitude that as a man, he is entitled to sex, and women are not allowed to say no to him. Right? They just became objects to him to fulfill and gratify his needs. Now, he would also tell us that it was the duty of either his older sister or his mother to secure him, it's one of their customs, to secure him a wife. He would tell them which girl he likes, and then they would go to that family and there would be some customary negotiations. But unfortunately, at some stage, I don't know, but in any case, his sister met a man and she left the family. So this was devastating to Mglengwa, because it meant that the woman that was his prize after winning the Oedipus complex was now gone, and he didn't have somebody that can introduce him to a woman or a potential wife. So as an adult, a young adult, he had fixated in the Oedipus complex. He had no latency phase of socializing. He was very much interested in the opposite sex, but he had nobody to introduce him. He didn't know how to talk to him. And as a political activist in KwaZulu-Natal, he had access to illegal firearms. And there we have a recipe for a serial killer. All right, so when I attended the course of the ex-FBI profilers, Robert Dressler and Roy Hazelwood, in Dundee in 1996, I was also taught about the crime phases. So in Zikode's pre-crime phase, that would be the time when he would fantasize about the crime. In the actual crime phase, his modus operandi would be that he would select his victim. Now, it was a very small community that he lived in by then. So he would often select them in church. In church, where he attended, he would say, that was the woman that wants. Then he would follow her home to see where she stays. And then at night, he would go to the hut or her little house and kick open the door. If there was a man, he would just shoot him. And then he would rape the woman and then just shoot her and leave the body there. There was no extended torture as there was in the case of Moses Sithole, for instance. So that was his modus operandi. Now, his post-crime behavior was that because it was such a small community, whenever somebody discovered the body, before I get to, one would think that would people not be alerted because they heard gunshots. But in that area, it's not unusual to hear gunshots because of the factional fighting everywhere. People just stay inside the houses. So the next morning, they discover somebody has been killed, a woman has been killed. So the whole community would congregate at that crime scene, and the police would arrive, and then the mortuary van would arrive. And what Mglengwa Zikode did is he would help the mortuary attendants to lift the body into the mortuary van. And that was regarded as just being a very considerate neighbor. And what have I said so many times? A serial killer could be your neighbor. And this one was the neighbor. So there was a very different crime scene that the detectives discovered. And this was not in a hut, but this was secluded in the forest. And this was a woman, and she was lying on her back, and her legs were spread eagle, and her face was completely mutilated. Now, when we find just the face mutilated, that is a sign of what we call depersonalization. That usually means that the killer knew the victim. And what they also found there is there was tinder, little grass, etc., inserted into her vagina. And they were not sure if this was actually one of his crime scenes. So I explained to them that, remember, as a teenage boy, he was very interested in women, but nobody taught him about women. So when he took this woman to the forest, it was secluded and he had time, and now he was interested in the genitalia of women. So he killed her. He probably knew her, and he later admitted he did know her. This was the woman that he wanted to get married to. And he was interested, and he fiddled around in her genitalia because as a teenage boy he didn't know very much. So just one little note as well about the TV series. This is Micki Pistorius on record. So on record, in the series, Charlotte Hope plays Micki. She has this dream of a serial killer coming up to her and strangling her when she's lying in bed. So this is completely inaccurate, and I've said so many times before. My nightmares were not about the killers. My nightmares were about the victims and feeling guilty of not catching the killers soon. And again, it is not in the nature of a serial killer to turn onto a profile report detective. So that scene, although Charlotte did a wonderful performance in that scene, it is actually it's fictionalized. It's a little bit of over sensationalism, but it's okay. Let's move on. So, if we get to the truth, then Theo Goldstone, who was the real detective. Now, Theo Goldstone was the detective that found the pornography, and I'm getting back to that. Now, regarding the pornography, here's a little bit of educational focus for you. When I attended the ex-FBI profilers course in Dundee, Roy Hazelwood taught us about collateral evidence. Now, he said collateral evidence are any items that may not directly associate the offender with a crime, but it provides information about his preferences, his fantasies, his interests, and his habits. It has value as proof of intent, and it's a source of information. It is another piece of the puzzle to present to the judge in court to give him a fuller picture of the accused. So collateral evidence may be sexual of nature, or it may seem innocent at first, but to the trained investigating officer, as Theo was, he will quickly learn to recognize it. So according to Hazelwood, there are 4 different types of collateral evidence. The first one is erotica. That is something that is usually sexually stimulating to the offender. It could be educational. Educational means it provides knowledge about investigative methods, the judicial process or psychology. It could be introspective. That means material that provides the offender insight into his own behavior, his sexual behavior or his personality. Or it could be intelligence. Intelligence is material that gives him information that's going to help him to commit the crime. Maps, etc., telephone numbers, etc. So erotica is any material that has a sexual value to a particular individual. So besides the obvious, it can also be very idiosyncratic. Any other person may not find rope particularly erotic. But to a certain person with a fetish for ropes, and we will discuss fetishes in one of the later episodes, he will get sexually excited when he plays with a rope. So material that should be considered erotic must be evaluated in the context that it is found. For example, in the investigation of pedophilia, if there is a photo album of photographs of the suspect's own children in clothes, that is not erotica. But if we find an album of other children which may be clothed, that might be erotic. So underwear of his own children is not erotica, but if we find underwear of other children in his home, that might be erotica. So, excuse me. I've noticed that some parents post photographs of their naked toddlers as their profile pictures on WhatsApp. And personally, I don't think that's such a good idea, because that could be stimulating to pedophiles looking at it. So, again, just being overcautious. Now, educational collateral. That is the material that provides him information on the execution of a crime, how to avoid arrest, what is the criminal procedures. So they try to keep themselves updated on the latest investigative techniques, forensic evidence and legal procedures, and even psychology. So in one of the previous episodes, we have the scene where Robert Reisler is sitting with Micki at a bar and they're discussing Ed Kemper, one of the worst serial killers in America. Now, Ed Kemper, they told me, had studied the questions of the MMPI. The MMPI is a forensic test that we use in these cases. And the MMPI has over 600 questions. And he memorized all of them and he write answers. Now that would be collateral evidence of educational value. So also, during an interview with one serial rapist, Roy Hazelwood told me that this rapist had told him that he had read all of Freud's books to get information. So I'm not thinking that everybody that reads my book or watches this television series is a criminal. So please indulge and read the book, okay, and watch the TV series. So, and then introspective material that provides the offender with knowledge about his own afflictions, his sexual deviance, his personality, etc. The FBI was quite surprised about the great amount of sexual offenders that wanted to know more about their afflictions. And Roy told me as well, once they arranged that he would give a public talk. And the purpose of this was there was a specific rapist that they hoped would attend his talk. And eventually there were 5 rapists that attended his talk. So that's just something to keep in mind. Right. So intelligence is anything that the criminal, not just serial killers, will need. They need a map where to go to, directions, etc., telephone numbers, photographs of the victim, etc. So that would be intelligence. Remember, David Selepe and Moses Zikode both kept newspaper clippings on their crimes and the investigation. Right, so that is all the collateral evidence. So you will notice in the television series that Micki is interviewing these ex-wives and ex-girlfriends, which gives us a lot of information about sexual oddities. And in this case, it was the mother. So as I said, Theo Goldstone was the detective and he discovered the pornography in the hut or the home of Zikode. And he had noticed that these were all pictures of women posing over chairs. So some of the surviving victims had told Theo that when Zikode raped them, they had to pose over a chair. So when their evidence and their statements go to court, and Theo can then testify that he found these pornography in the hut, it builds the puzzle for the judge about the person sitting in front of him. So that is the value of collateral evidence. So just a little bit of informative focus as well. Often we get that people say, but I had an unhappy, toxic childhood. An unhappy, toxic childhood is not an excuse for crime. It is true that not all children grow up in meadows of flowers and frolicking kittens and meteors of fairy dust. That's definitely not true. And some parents are really, really busy, like Zikode's mother. And I have a lot of empathy for single mothers bringing up their children. It's a tough job, very tough job. But it is also true that some people horrendously abuse their children. And should they be blamed? Yes, but they are guilty. And they should not be completely exonerated. But also, when a child is being abused, that child is passive. It doesn't have control. There's nothing much that it can really do about that. However, when you grow up to become a young adult, then you do have choices. So you can either say, I am a successful, independent adult, despite what my parents did. Or you can say, I am a failure and a criminal because of my parents. So your choice is either despite or because. The choice is yours. But whatever choice you make, do not expect leniency from the police or the court. If your choice was to deprive somebody else of their choice. I thought, an unhappy childhood is not an excuse for crime, and it never ever will be. I have interrogated many serial killers. That is my job. And I always ask them, what is the most terrible thing that had happened to you as a child? And they did not say the fact that I was locked up naked in a cupboard. They did not say the fact that I was burnt on my genitals with cigarettes. They did not say the fact that I was raped or sodomized, or that I was forced to eat dog food. None of them mentioned any physical abuse, although they endured it as the worst thing. But they did say the worst thing that happened to me was my parents told me I was useless. So what are we telling our children? Research in neuropsychology has showed us that when a person experiences physical pain, and then there is a certain neural pathway in the brain that it follows that registers that physical pain. Now, research has also shown us that when a person experiences emotional pain, psychological pain, then the pathway in the brain, the neural pathway, is very similar to the one that's the physical pain. Therefore, people experience emotional pain as painful as they do physical pain in the brain. Research has also shown us that when teenagers are ostracized from their peer groups, they experience that emotional pain to the same degree as third-degree burn wounds. So that tells us a little bit something. So what are we telling our children? As a little girl, my father bought myself and my sister our very first horses. And as a 10-year-old little girl, I was very much in love with horses. And then I read about these wild horses in the Camargue. And they are a herd of wild white horses running on the beaches of the Camargue in south of France. And on a level of telepathy, I contacted those horses. I made contact with them. And I promised them, I will find you one day. I promise you, one day in my life, I will find you. And since I was a very little girl, my mother always told me, I believe in you, and you can become anything that you want. It was the message I got from my parents. So my life happened, and as I've told you in the very first episode, I studied BA languages, and after that I was a journalist for quite a few years. And then I returned to university and I studied psychology. Eventually I was appointed in the police. I became the first profiler, etc. And so my life went ahead. And then one day in my office in the police, I got a call from a lady. And she said she represents the Centre International des Sciences des Criminels et Pénals in France, which is an organization that promotes cooperation between the judicial, the police, and the correctional services of different countries to work together. And she said they are holding a conference in Paris for European people and judges and policemen, etc. And she would like me to come and teach them about profiling. So I was very excited, and I went to my police and of course approved it. So then I went to France. And this then became an annual occurrence that I would be in France every year for a while, and I would teach them about profiling. And then one day I was in my apartment in France, and I got a call from the magazine Paris. And they told me that they wanted to take a photograph of me with the wind blowing in my hair. The only location that day where the wind was blowing was the south of France. So they flew me down to the coast from Paris. The photographer collected me at the airport and we drove out to the beach. And I remember seeing the road sign, Camargue. And as I was standing on the beach in the canal with the wind blowing in my hair, they came. A herd of them came, the wild horses. And they snuggled up to me and they played with me. And they said, we were waiting for you. You promised us that you would come, and you did. You came. And I will never forget that day, how my young girl dreams came true. And although I could never envisage the journey that I had to take to get there, I'd faced many perils as a profiler of serial killers. It still came true, because my parents believed in me, and they told me that I could do anything I wanted to, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to meet the horses of the Camargue, and I did. Keep on watching the episode, and you will see what eventually happened to Zikode. He was given life sentences for murder and rape, and an extra 140 years for robbery crimes as well, and crimes related to the firearms. At the end of this episode, we see Micki and Erica and Suzanne having some fun in Suzanne's apartment. Now, a little bit of a pathetic history is years ago, on a friend of mine's game farm, there were quite a few people there, and Suzanne van Pletzen, Zetske van Pletzen, who plays Suzanne, was there with her husband, and that's the first time that I met her. And who would think that years later she would be playing my sister in a television series? So, hello Zetske. And also, right at the end of the series, you would see that Micki receives a bunch of flowers from Handsome Mark, her boyfriend. So let's see if Handsome Mark sticks around. So keep watching. Next week, episode 6 of Catch Me a Killer television series, and I will meet you shortly after in episode 6 of Micki Pistorius, Profiler on Record. Then I will meet a serial killer with prostate and his that, and how he took his revenge on the prostitutes and sex workers. So I hope you find this informative, educational, inspirational, and it is an authentic account of my life of working with criminal minds without sensationalizing it. If you like it, give us your thumbs up, share it, and subscribe. See you next week.
She was a girl with a divided heart, like the light and the dark, a divided heart, between two continents and somewhere far home, but where it really lay was deep within